Welcome to the Angus Warburton podcast. I'm here today with Emily English. Emily, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Now, the question I always start this podcast is, why are you a winner?
I'm a winner because I have achieved everything for myself I ever hoped I'd achieve. And I always had this kind of deep down belief that I would be able to kind of do incredible things with my life. I always just knew it in my head. I didn't allow any other kind of negativity or doubt to creep in. And I think I have a goal and I'm chasing down that goal. And if I look back 5 years ago, what would that girl think of me now? And that girl would be so proud. And that's why I'm a winner.
Do you know what? That's my favourite answer so far. Because
Really?
you completely own the fact that you're a winner. Because obviously I get people who come on and be like, oh, I'm not a winner yet. Or
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I've invited you on because you're a winner. And that answer was amazing. How have you developed that kind of mental state of just knowing in yourself you'll get there?
I think it's because I do something that I genuinely know I love. My job and my work around nutrition and food, it's like breathing to me. It's just so second nature. And I'm incredibly lucky to find that in my life. And I think as soon as if you feel uncomfortable with what you're doing, that's where doubt can really creep in. And if you just make sure that you enjoy the process and you do something that you love that brings you purpose and fulfillment, I always think that success just comes with that. If you're in it for what you're doing rather than an end point, that's where you'll just keep on growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, enjoying the process is absolutely everything. I think there's this idea that if we get to this end goal as well from a financial perspective, we're going to be happy. When actually, if you're not enjoying the moment and the build up to that position, what's the point in really doing it, right?
No, my therapist said it's like having finally getting a Ferrari and then just throwing away the keys and never driving it. So what's the point unless you're actually going to be able to drive the car?
So true. So how did you get into what you do today in the first place?
So I come from a family of kind of cooks and chefs. My mum's mum has a gorgeous little restaurant that I used to be in the kitchen from a very young age. And I also come from a really big family. So cooking responsibilities was something that was passed on to me. I'm one of 5, but I'm the second oldest. And then my mum had 3 kids under the age of 3 when I was about 8 years old. So I suddenly had to be very independent, take a lot on my shoulders to help support my mum in that process. My dad was obviously the only person working, always out working. My mum was trying to juggle those 3 infant kids. My older brother was kind of a little bit more disengaged with the cooking. And that was just something that fell into my role. And I always loved the ability to... Food has an amazing impact on people. And when you cook for someone, it's essentially you sharing a bit of yourself and a bit of your love. And I just found a lot of purpose and identity in it. But when I was young, I was always a science buff. So human biology, human physiology, biochemistry, all of that stuff, absolutely obsessed with. And I was originally going to go to university to do biochemistry. Then when I was 17 years old, I was at a festival having a great time, and I got scouted to be an in-house model at ASOS. And I had this amazing opportunity, incredible financial opportunity from a very young age. And I started modeling, and I had a great period of years at ASOS, and I absolutely loved it. And I remember being the girl who would smash a ham and cheese panini and have a Coca-Cola with my lunch. And yet the girls around me would be sitting there with like little salad bowls, undressed, maybe with like a bit of tuna in. And that it never really influenced me at the time until I stepped outside of the ASOS bubble and I got a modelling agency. And this modelling agency turned around and they commented on my weight, and they said I needed to lose weight, and I was a people pleaser at the time. It's very much in my nature to want people to approve of me. And I was like, okay, fine, like I'm going to do the best job ever at this. And I suddenly became incredibly obsessed with food, but how little I could eat. So what I could control calorie-wise. I had no education on proper nutrition. I had no idea what my body needed to function and perform. And I ended up getting really ill. And it was a period of 6 to 8 months where my weight just dropped and dropped and dropped. And luckily, I was able to find an incredible therapist. I left the modeling industry. And then I started to kind of like reflect on the whole kind of process that I'd been through. And I was like, but why do we need this nutrition? Why do we need this food from my science brain? And that's where I changed my degree over when I finally went to uni kind of 2 years after all my friends. And I studied nutrition at King's, and I've kind of never looked back really. And that's the natural progression.
Was there a light bulb moment when you were overcoming your eating disorder you went through?
Yeah. So I remember it was summer and I was in my kitchen and my mum had made cheese rolls for everyone with fresh tomatoes, rocket, wholemeal bap. And I remember everyone just sitting down, just saying, thanks, Mum, picked up the sandwich. I remember looking at it a bit and I had that breakdown moment. I was like, I can't eat this. I don't know why I can't eat this. And I was like, why can't I eat this? And it was that moment that I don't know why, it just clicked for me. I was like, this is not okay. You do not want this. This is not what you want for you and for your life. And after that day, everything changed. And it's so funny because I remember that moment so clearly, and it was a cheese roll.
Isn't that amazing though, how you remember it so clearly? And what advice would you give to girls going through the same thing who are so body image conscious and are looking at, shows online like Love Island, for example? What advice would you give to just embracing yourself and being you?
Ask yourself, who are you? So who am I? And what do I want? And I think so often in life we can get so lost by external influences and worrying about other people's opinions. And you don't have to be reckless and not care, but who are you and what do you want? And we have a very distinctive voice in our head that gets muddled up with that kind of bully or counter voice in our head that tells us that we're not good enough, that promotes our insecurities, where the reality is your voice is in there and you need to just trust yourself to be able to kind of listen to it, follow it and find it.
What would you say some of the key milestones have been for you other than that?
So I definitely think it's when I took the leap to launch my own business. And this was just pre-COVID. So I'd left my job in January time. It was 2019, I think.
What were you doing then?
I was working for a DNA nutrition testing company. So great job, loved it. But I wanted something for me and my own that I wanted to build. And I started my nutrition clinic. I remember setting up my website with Squarespace, putting the Google ads out there, kind of designing all my programs, writing all my meal plans. I remember I sat there and thinking, it's going to be great. Like, I wonder if I can hire a clinic space. COVID hit and I had no furlough. And I'd taken the leap. So it was kind of too late. I had to make this thing work. And I just had to believe in myself. I was like, everything will be okay. Just keep on going, keep on doing it. And I remember when I got my first client, and it was this amazing French woman called Emily, and I worked with her for 2 years after that. And once she came in, it just kept on going. So kept on finding new clients, word of mouth, growth. So I think the biggest milestone for me was just taking that brave step to be like, do you know what? I can do this. And then when trouble hit, still believing that I could do it.
Was there something that really gave you that sudden drive, or has it always been a thing in the back of your mind? Because some people obviously might be really enjoying their job like you were and then go, actually, no, I want my own thing. Or has it always been a thing for you to do your own thing?
It's always been a thing for me. I was the kind of person who would Skype lessons because I knew that I could just go home and do it myself kind of thing. I'm not very good with other people's structure and routine. And I've always been like that. I've always been incredibly independent, quite hungry for just making my own decisions, my own choices. So I just knew that it was always something that I was going to do. But it's one of those things that there's never a right time. So more often than not, we'll put something off because we're like, oh, but I've got this on, maybe it'll be better next week or next month. And then next month turns into 3 months and then 6 months and then a year. And then you feel like, oh no, maybe it's just too late and I'm too old. And you just have to give it a go, because failure isn't this catastrophic thing. Failure is part of learning and part of growing. And if someone told me, if you leave your job now, you know there's going to be a massive pandemic that's going to hit in a month, would I have left? No, probably not. And I wouldn't have achieved everything that I've achieved. So it's not being reckless, but if you know that you have the discipline, motivation and drive to do something, you can do it.
Do you feel as a nutritionist in the wellness space, at times the term nutritionist can be undervalued?
Definitely. So I think people think nutritionist and they just think kind of pretty, privileged, hyper focused on kind of greens and green juices and celery. Like, it's this weird warped image that nutrition is somehow removed from enjoyable eating and good food. Whereas I really like to think that I cross this boundary of normalizing good food, normalizing healthy eating, healthy habits, and making it feel accessible to everyone. Like, I make lasagnas, I make burgers, I eat pastas, and I show people how you can kind of have the best of both worlds without that kind of diet culture and that diet mentality, which unfortunately, so many nutritionists put out there.
Yeah, it's quite sad really, isn't it? And of course, for me, coming from a personal training background and clients I work with, I like to keep the nutrition side of things more on the basic side, purely to emphasize the training side of things, because I don't like to get too obsessive about things like calories. So I guess that approach around, on a personal level, I go very much for an 80-20 rule, which works perfectly for me. Do you find that that's always a good approach to have?
Everything in moderation.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you start making things kind of black and white, cutting things out, thinking that things are good or bad, that's where it just gets too murky. Keep things simple. Good health, good food, good nutrition does not have to be complicated, but it has to work for you. So if you're trying to do something that you're finding impossible and you know isn't going to be sustainable for more than a year, don't do it. Try and find something that's going to slot into your pattern and your lifestyle.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, clients I've worked with who I've, helped lose like 40, 50 kilos, for example, they've had trainers go to them and say, here's your diet plan. This is it. That's what you can follow. Whereas the approach of actually say, well, let's try and ease things in. Let's actually break down your diet. Let's see small changes we can make. Because, making drastic changes to diet is virtually impossible for most people, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like asking someone who is a professional runner to suddenly start skiing if they've never skied before. Like, it's just
It's
because
so
it's
true.
exercise doesn't mean that it's easy and feasible.
Yeah. What would you say your proudest achievement is so far?
That's a really difficult question. I don't actually think I have a distinct moment where I can say this is my proudest moment. I think it's a collective of strength of character of all the things that I've been through and gone through. And I think of all the challenges and things that I faced that have been maybe a little bit more of a struggle or a setback. I've been able to pick myself up, brush myself off and keep on going. I'm proud of myself for not stopping when times got tough.
How in those moments did you dig so deep?
That core inner belief that I knew I was going to achieve my dreams and my goals, and not just knowing that I wanted to achieve them, wanting to achieve them. Such an innate hunger for life and the message that I want to put out there and the person that I want to grow. It's literally like breathing for me. And I always say I want my business, I want my platform, I want my space to be there for people for when I was poorly and when I was misinformed. If I found me, I would have found my page so inspiring and so useful. And if we actually think of proud moments, that's when I get messages through from followers, from girls, men who tell me that I've changed their whole outlook on nutrition. I've really helped them out of a dark place. That for me is that moment where I'm like, I am so proud.
That's amazing. That really is amazing. And I think, with social media, obviously you've seen such huge growth over the last even few months, right? 6 months, let's say.
Yeah.
I think the great thing about what I've seen on your social media as well is you haven't kind of changed who you are regardless of, your following being, I think when I first saw you were at like 20,000 followers and then to where you are now. Can you highlight the kind of importance of, no matter how big your audience is, still thinking, okay, I can make an influence to 10 people?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
100%. Because I think it's one of those where rather than trying to just please everyone, if you have a core message or a core belief for what you're doing, if you stay true to that and if you stay authentic and real and everything that you're putting out there is just genuinely you, that will always, even if it affects one person, that one person will then affect another person. So if I affect a mum, who would then affect her kids and how she starts to feed them, and then that will just bleed down through generations and families. And I always just think, stay authentic, stay true to yourself. Try not to constantly think about people pleasing everyone. The bigger I get, the more I know that I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But the core people who do follow me, who do engage with me, it's just so amazing that they have experienced so much benefit and they are so much happier from a nutrition point of view, just from the recipes and the food and the normalized content that I put out there.
Has the rapid growth and following been at times quite difficult to deal with?
Definitely. Yeah. I think pressure's on for sure. I've actually started seeing a therapist again recently, which I think is really important. And again, another thing that we need to normalize. Our mental health is just as important as our physical health. And I think it can get very overwhelming I probably get 100 DMs a day.
Wow.
And it's growing more and more of people asking for advice, recipe tips, comments, just loads of different things. And it's one of those that I care so much that I want to be able to touch and appreciate and respect every single person who is growing in my community. But it's almost putting too much pressure on myself to deliver myself in that way to everyone. And I think the growth is amazing, but yeah, boy, it does come with some pressure.
And how have you found therapy?
I feel like I'm a very good candidate for therapy because I'm very mentally aware. I'm very in tune with my thoughts, my emotions. And I think...
Yeah, you're clearly very happy to express the fact that you have been in therapy. And I think from an outside in, a lot of people would look at you as someone who has got their, excuse my French, shit together.
Yeah.
So it's very nice to hear how openly you talk about it.
I think as well, like we all think that everyone is doing great. They have no worries in their life. They have no insecurities, no vulnerabilities, but we all share in all of those human emotions because we are all human. I bet Angelina Jolie sits there and cries sometimes at night, and probably people that you idolize, and we all go through the same shit. And the more open and honest we are about it, the more comfort we find in knowing that we're not alone. And that's something that I would always want to touch base on. Obviously, my therapy journey is my therapy journey. It's not going to be the same for everyone. And what I'm going to therapy for and what I'm using it for is going to be different to others. But it's just that step of normalizing it and making people not feel like they're weird or they're doing something wrong or something's wrong with them for struggling mentally.
So what would you say to people who are kind of on the fence about doing therapy? What advice would you give to them to just push them into it? Because of course, I think those people who are on the fence are the ones who are like, oh, I might feel judged or something like that.
I think so therapy doesn't necessarily mean that you go to someone who's going to give you the answers. I always compare it to a little bit of like de-weeding of your gardens. It's just a bit of housekeeping, a bit of general maintenance, but they really help break down those questions of you, your identity, your goals, what's your voice in your mind, in your head. And it's something that is always worth a try, but don't have kind of these over expectations like it's taking a pill and it's just going to make you better. Like it's not 2 sessions, 3 sessions of therapy and suddenly you're a new person.
But that's the same with anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same with fitness, nutrition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important that you think of it as a longer term maintenance tool, the same way that you maybe get physio or a massage from time to time. Like you can't get one and never need one again for the rest of your life. It's a maintenance.
But also it is fine to dip in and out of, like you have, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, the last time I did therapy obviously was when I had my eating disorder, and I think there's a lot of patterns of behavior which make someone be a little bit OCD and addictive that will still creep in throughout life. And my biggest issue is perfectionism. So wanting everything to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, it's a reflection on myself. And I think when we talk about the growth of everything that I'm going through, it's the risk of being less perfect is greater, which I sometimes really struggle with. And again, it's something that I'm lucky that I have an amazing audience and amazing people, a group of people around me who make me feel like I can be imperfect. It doesn't need to be that kind of set in stone way of what my other side of my brain tells me, which is really, really nice.
Do you think at times you might be too harsh on yourself?
100%. Yeah, it's one of the main reasons why I kind of went back to therapy, because the only person who is really mean to me is myself.
God, yeah, I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, loads of people around you saying, obviously, you're doing amazing things, but it's the constant idea in our heads, right, that we could do better.
And that is exhausting. And it's one of the things that I'm so grateful for, this growth and the opportunity and all the amazing things that are happening to me. But my brain is forcing me to keep on going. Like, what's next? Like, you've got to keep on growing. Like, if you don't, if you take your foot off the gas, you're gonna fail. And that can be really, really tiring and really exhausting. And I want to enjoy the process. I want to be present in the process. I want to have the keys to my Ferrari and I want to drive it during the time. And that's something that I'm really, really keen. And anyone who is going through something or growing a business, don't forget that the period of your growth is one of the best times of your life. The end point isn't necessarily going to be any sweeter than what you're going through now.
Yeah, because I heard something the other day, and it was, a win in your living room or a win on a super yacht will feel exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think people lose sight of that. They see that person on the super yacht, whilst they might see it on TV or they might see it on TikTok, whatever it might be, and they go, "Oh, those guys just look so happy." But actually, if they're celebrating a win and you're celebrating a win, it'll be the same emotional feelings, right?
Always. And I definitely think I've felt that, because I've had very high times in my life where, from a monetary point of view, I've had everything. I've been very safe and secure. And then a few years ago, my life really got flipped upside down, and I started pretty much from scratch again. And I was the happiest I've ever been. If I actually think of like my pure joy and fulfillment, that time of my life was when I had the least. I had the least security, the least kind of set in stone, kind of everything's good.
Do you think back then you were just maybe better at celebrating the small joys in life?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It makes you, it's that presence, isn't it? It's that presence in life where you're there and you're actually able to take on and experience and acknowledge and find peace with all of those small things, rather than pelting at full speed, like eyes on the prize, not actually looking at your beautiful surroundings.
So what things will you do to switch off?
Actually, weirdly, cooking.
Yeah, of course.
I love to cook. Cooking is...
but you can put your phone to one side, put some music on, have a nice glass of wine. Yeah.
I lose myself in it. And I think in the Japanese call it, is it a kikai? It's like a state of flow that you can get in where you come very... kind of zoned out. So some people get it if they're drawing, painting, writing, playing an instrument. Mine is cooking. So if I just create and I'm so in the zone, I forget about every other thing. So that really, really helps me wind out. And fitness.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Is exercise, a big staple point to, your happiness?
Massively so. Yeah. And it will swing and it will vary. And sometimes I don't really want to do it. Sometimes I get obsessed with like Pilates, and then I'll go back to like weightlifting again. And then maybe I'll pick up running in summer, and then maybe I'll stop in winter because I don't like running at the cold. And I always think exercise isn't just a kind of set box. You have to be nice and flexible and listen to your body and your emotions and your mood, and different exercises will fit in with different points of your life.
Yeah, massively so. And I think the idea that you have to do the same exercise routine 4 years on end is absolute rubbish. The only reason you would have to is maybe from an aesthetic standpoint, but actually anyone in that kind of mindset is actually often really struggling, right? When aesthetics is just the goal, and you're kind of on these low calorie diets, or without going into too much detail of like bodybuilding shows, I look at some of their diets and actually, the way they're kind of posing in the mirror and like clearly on the outside very happy with themselves, getting all this validation, on the inside a lot of the time they're crying, right?
It's an addiction. So I feel like that style of life feeds into addictive OCD type personalities. So if you're someone who finds comfort in pattern, routine, rigidity, people get on really well with it, but it actually creates like a very, very toxic relationship and mental health space, because it just feeds into that addictive part of the brain that it's really hard to break. And there are loads of people who are affected by those things. But I mean, some people are not. And one thing I'm always quite careful of doing is not putting an eating disorder brain on every single person. Some people can calorie count, use MyFitnessPal and not even care. Like, it doesn't affect them negatively. Yet some people, it's like gospel. If they break it, they have mad anxiety and it's kind of game over. But not everyone has the same relationship with food.
Yeah, I think it does slightly though. Like, everyone who calorie counts to a point has an element of an obsession.
Yeah,
I would say. I mean, that's maybe that's talking from a personal level. For example, I went through a phase where, I would avoid social situations. And that's when I was like, I'm a bit obsessed with this. So maybe I was lucky that I was able to address it.
Yeah.
Maybe I was just fortunate in that sense. But yeah, it's so true what you say about calorie counting there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's such a fine line between what's okay and what's not okay. What is, if you wanted to avoid those situations because you were competing, for example, and it's like, no, this is more important than that party.
I thought it was just for business, genuinely. And that's so sad and I look back at it, I was 19, 20 years old and I started as a personal trainer. I genuinely thought, if I get shredded, I'll get more clients. Yeah. And that is so far from the truth. I'm the happiest I am, mentally that I've ever been. But that's because physically, all I'm bothered about is how I feel and how I perform.
Yeah.
And my clients, all they want is a good coach.
Yeah.
As long as I'm in decent nick, of course, set the standard with the training side of things. But that's all that matters, really, is just being a good person to your clients.
That's amazing for you, because I think that's the kind of breaking out this, if I'm not perfect, then I'm going to fail. And you and I sound very similar in the way that our minds work in that sense. Like, when my agency said, you need to lose weight, I was like, weight loss means they're going to like me more. I'm going to book more jobs. I'm going to be more successful. So it came this kind of weird cycle that you just get warped and wrapped up in, where the actual fact is you have to try and take a bigger perspective on your life and what do you want from your life and what brings you joy, not just what you feel like you should be for others.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, I always say to new clients that come on board, that last bit of body fat that you're so desperate to lose, that's your life. It's weekends away with your other half. That's time with the family. That's, weekends away with the lads or the girls. Like, that is your life. And it's so important people live like that, right?
Yeah. So, so important. And I always say to people, like, you can have both. You can have the health, the nutrition, the feeling good, feeling energized, nourishing your body. You can have those nights that ended a little bit too late and maybe you shouldn't have had that last glass of red wine and Sunday roast and sticky toffee pudding. Like, that is needed for your soul and for your joy. And that's why I always say, like, who are you and what do you want? Who am I? What do I want? Because so often, more often than not, with health and nutrition and fitness, it's our negative voice, it's our bully, and it's that state of perfectionism that tries to intervene with the things that actually bring us joy.
Do you have any regrets?
Do you know what? I actually don't, because if I regretted anything, I wouldn't be who and where I am today. every single thing that maybe didn't go my way or I didn't do quite right has put me exactly where I am today. And if I regret any of those things, then potentially I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, so you've managed to obviously use the things you've gone through actually as long-term as a positive thing, right?
Always. It's made those negative situations in my life has led me to meet people who have been an incredible positive impact, who have led me to move somewhere that has had an incredible impact on my career, to have the opportunity to start something and start a new business, which is potentially life-changing for me. All of those things, of course, do I have negative emotions towards them? Do I feel upset, anger? Yeah, of course. But do I regret them? No.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And, a lot of people say they don't believe in the term regret, whereas she was like, well, it's good to regret things slightly in a way, right?
Hold yourself accountable.
But using that regret to then push yourself forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say you've got any real personal relationships that have influenced your success today?
I actually would say that my current partner, Aaron, has been the most wonderful, life-changing person that's ever happened to me. When it comes to someone who fills up your cup, supports you, picks you up when you're down, but also is that joy and fun and carefree spirit. I honestly don't think I would be where I am if it wasn't for meeting him. He's just the most wonderful partner, wonderful boyfriend, wonderful best friend. And he's definitely, a special one.
That's amazing. And I've spoken about relationships with other people on the podcast as well. The importance of it in your life is so significant, isn't it?
It's so grounding. It is so, so grounding. And he's the one person that if I ever am having that kind of really hard mental space, I know that I can I never like to rely on someone for my happiness. So I never like someone to be the only source of why I'm doing something or the only source of why I'm happy. But the best thing about my relationship with Ez is it's so shared. It's so side by side. It's so kind of wholesome and complete that he's part of my joy and we share in that. And it's incredible. I feel very, very lucky.
No, it's everything. And it's so sad when I'm sure you hear it from people, but when you hear that next story about, they say negative things about their other half and the person they're with, and I'm like, why are you with them? And there's this idea that, a lot of the time people are with them because of a sunk cost fallacy, where they're like, oh, I've been with them for 3 years. If they don't want to grow with you and if they don't want to push you in their life, it's probably best to let go, right?
Yeah. I always think if something takes away more than it gives, you have to let it go. And sometimes we hold on to these beliefs that, oh no, but we have this, or they make me feel that. But it's like the 80-20 rule with your food and nutrition. Like it's the same with your relationships. If your relationships are 80% bad, 20% good, or even 60% bad, 40% good, you have to weigh up, is this balance right for me? Is this helping me grow emotionally and in my life? Or is it just depleting me?
Yeah, so true. What would you say the single most valuable piece of advice you've ever been given? It's a very broad question,
it's
sorry.
A very broad question.
There's probably lots of moments that stand out.
Yeah. I think it would just be like a little mantra, which, again, it's going back to that kind of self-value, and it's a mantra of I am enough, I have enough. Because although I'm incredibly ambitious, I'm incredibly motivated, I've got loads of drive, and this is only just the beginning for me and what I'm doing, but it's that I am enough, I have enough, and that helps me manage the process and manage expectations of myself from myself.
And how would you say that, you've consistently developed? How have you never been at the point where you've been like, do you know what? I'm just going to sit back and relax.
It's me. That's just me, personality type. Ever since I was at school, I've never been like, cool, I'm done. Like that, I'm happy with that. And it's the same with recipes. Like if you leave me there with a recipe, I will tweak it till the end of time, because there will always be something that I'm like, oh, do you know what? If I change that, I could add that or I could twist that. And even if I go through my content, I'll edit a video and I look back and I'll be like, oh, should have made that 0.2 seconds shorter there. And maybe
Really?
I always see what can be improved.
Do you wish at times you weren't like that?
Oh my God, yeah. But like all the time, because I always say my head's like a mariachi band. Constantly, like it's like fluttering around. Even when we have this conversation, my head will be thinking about 5 different things, just like floating in the back of my head. But I credit that to what I do and my success, my creativity. And my gift is that I can just write recipes in my brain. I can taste them in my brain. I will write them down and then I'll make it and I'll just post it.
That's so fascinating. Because, yeah, with obviously the cooking side of things, has it just always been ingrained in you, that kind of thing? Or do you think that's just developed over time?
I think it's developed over time. Like, it's weird because I actually was a really fussy eater as a kid. I hated food. I couldn't stand the stuff and had a really boring diet. Like pizza, like McDonald's in sixth form, I literally used to go and get a McDonald's breakfast every single day. And I look back at my diet now as a teen, I was like, God. But it's funny because I'd never thought that I would find so much purpose and identity in cooking, food and nutrition. But I actually really didn't find that purpose and identity until I was 23, 24.
Really?
It took a long time. I was always talented in the kitchen, but cooking used to be for functional purposes because times were tough and my mum didn't have time and I had to step up and help make something delicious and cheap for the family. But yeah, it literally wasn't until 23, 24 that I really came into my passion and my love for what we have on our plates. And I do all the science and all the bits and bobs up here, and then I translate it into something that's delicious that you're going to want to eat, that nourishes both your body and your soul.
I like how you said you didn't obviously discover really that until 23, 24, because I think there's so much pressure on us in society to know exactly what we want to do, even as soon as we leave school, right?
Yeah. I remember being first year in my university degree in nutrition and nearly thinking I was going to drop out because I was just like, it sucks to be back in education again. I had 2 years out. I was in the modelling industry. It was fun. It was totally different style of work. And now I have no money coming in and it's like a totally different side of the coin. But it's one of those things that not everything has to be, well, as soon as I was born, I knew that I was a gifted this XYZ and it was my calling. And it's sometimes you just have to trust in the path of life and it will show you kind of different doors, different avenues. And then something one day, just like a relationship, you'll find something that will click and you just know that it's right for you and you know that it's innately something that you should pursue.
So obviously you've seen exponential growth, as we've said, in the last half year or so. How are you setting new goals? Because you're probably absolutely smashing goals pretty fast.
Yeah.
How are you still going that next, and how are you reevaluating?
So my biggest thing now is what are the next 5 to 10 years going to look like for me? Where can I find security in something that I can build to grow to then sit back on? So how can I utilize what I'm doing and spread knowledge in a very kind of A to B format? So I actually have a very, very exciting business opportunity with some incredible investors, which is really exciting, which is something that is kind of like my next big thing to kind of separate from the social side of things, much more of a kind of like A to B product business. And then social side of things, I would love to just keep on growing and just working with some incredible brands. So there are a few brands I have in mind that I'm kind of hungry for and just really building proper incredible relationships with them that I essentially just become like a household name in that product association. So anything that I believe in, any sort of food product, cookware brand that I can just kind of like really lock in home, I think that would be really nice. And then potentially some kind of TV work, maybe, who knows, maybe some sort of presenting, hosting, documentaries, that kind of thing, I think would be nice on the side. But different avenues, but all still kind of feeding back into me, message that I want to put out there and what I think can help and benefit people.
With everything you're achieving, would you say you're happy?
Yes. And I think I had to think about that for quite a long time, because I think happiness is a funny word, because sometimes I feel like we have so much pressure on ourselves to be happy. And sometimes we feel this expectation that we should be happy because of our circumstance. So it's like someone will look at you and be like, how can you say that you're not happy because you have that? And sometimes you almost feel like your right to be unhappy is stripped away the more successful you become. But happiness is something that comes and goes. If you ask me, are you fulfilled? Are you content? Yes, 100%. Because I know that every single aspect and every single thing that I've built around me and my life is something that is feeding and fueling my soul.
Yeah, and when it comes to happiness, at the end of the day, you know, we talk about it, and as you said, there's a lot of pressure to feel happy. Our life is what we know.
Mm.
And no one can be in our shoes, whether, you know, they look at us as someone who might be like, oh, you're in an amazing financial situation, how can you be unhappy? It's what you know. And only you truly can know what you're feeling like, right?
Exactly. And you always have to just honor your emotions. And just because you don't feel happy at the time doesn't mean that you're unhappy. And it's okay to not be okay. And sometimes you just have to ride those waves. And life comes with the ups and the downs and the good and the bad, and doesn't mean that either is wrong or right.
Emily, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on this episode of the Angus Warburton podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
I've loved it.
Now, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram or TikTok, and the Nutritionist. Or my website is just www.emilyenglish.co.uk. And that's it really. They're kind of my main social platforms.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.